Northern Lights, a look at Minnesota books and writers, is presented by the Minnesota Center for the Book, a program of the Minnesota Humanities Commission, with funding provided by Target Stores and the Elmer L. and Eleanor J. Anderson Foundation.
Hi, welcome to Northern Lights. I'm Monica DeGrazia. Emilio DeGrazia and Norton Stillman and I would like to welcome you today to a celebration of the publication of 33 Minnesota poets.
I'm Norton Stillman, the publisher of, this is the fifth anthology that I published. I did the first 25 Minnesota poets, 25 Minnesota poets 2, then 25 Minnesota writers, 26 Minnesota writers, and 33 Minnesota poets. Today was a very special day. It's the first time we've had like a marathon of all of them reading together. And it was a special treat to see them all, and I think they all enjoyed seeing each other.
We're here to celebrate the human voice, in a way. And it's a special kind of human voice that we're celebrating. It's a human voice that cares an awful lot about how the words come together. It's a human voice that, it seems to me, is confronting a cultural crisis, I think, insofar as we live, it seems, in an age whose culture is characterized mainly by distraction, geared to distract us. And the poets, I think, are trying to pull us back. They're trying to pull us back toward whatever freedom is available within carefully considered form. And it's a private endeavor, it seems, because the poets often work by themselves. And as the anthology, I think, bore out to us, there are an awful lot of people nobody knows about. These people are working in apparent solitude and don't seem to get much attention. And but yet we're also convinced there's an awful lot of really good people doing it. And they're doing it carefully, they're doing it lovingly, they're doing it persistently. And it's a culture that happens in small places. And we hear the human voice at its best. And I think we need that in an age of distraction.
I like the idea of having, from Minnesota, many poets, some that have been published before and some that haven't. I published, I think it's over 25 years ago, the first 25 Minnesota poets, and I did 1 and 2, and that was done with the Minneapolis Public Schools. And a lot of the people that were in the original now have been published nationally. And so that's kind of gives me a good feeling. So that's what it's all about, is to be able to have more people be involved with the wonderful poets we have in the state.
33 Minnesota Poets is not the last word, of course, in Minnesota poetry. There are, we had 152 submissions for this anthology and could only choose 33. So there are a lot of poets, a lot of very good poets who are not in the book, but we also thank them for writing and for their commitment to poetry, too.
Linda says in her statement, as writers, we all start with the same dauntingly blank page. Every poem begins with fear, its initial energy. It's only after I relax with the fear that I'm able to bring forth a poem.
Every mother should say, "You are not evil. You are the heart of an oak tree, my love." I have seen to it that my children know they are not evil. But do they know my love, my heart? Is this lesson being corrected for my benefit? Distance corrects the memory with a soft blow to the midsection. Tonight, we will burn the ritual branch, flame against lake, frost on the window, melting.
The poetry which excites me the most is from spiritual texts, especially Bengali songs and Hindu texts, because of the powerful truths they are in and the beauty of their inspired expressions.
A dead shrew turns up on the doorstep of my sister's house. an offering delivered from the woods by one of the cats of the house. It lies belly up, a little white belly, and has a long, oddly shaped snout, used for whatever a shrew do. My shrew-wise brother-in-law explains that shrews are the smallest mammals, extraordinarily ferocious for their size, and they can even run across water. A prehistoric shrew was found, he says, which was even smaller than the one before us, which looked smaller than a mouse. The cuddly cats with killer instincts are no longer interested in this shrew because it isn't moving, but its seemingly grotesque appearance keeps me hovering over its tiny corpse until I begin to ponder death itself. I think of Jeremy, a friend's son, young, brilliant lad who crashed to death in a car. Think of death, afterlife, and all of us inhabiting lives that will turn belly over and plunge into another dimension, leaving a shell, a hollow form for the still living to ponder.
A good poem is awake. This, above else, I look for in a poem. It's easy to chase pleasure and evade the whole issue of being an alert, thoughtful, caring human being. But a poem is awake to what it is to be human and engaged with the world.
Men in winter stand out on the ice over their holes, augers laid beside them, dipping sieves to keep the blackness liquid, jigging hooks that pierce icy minnows fathoms below in the utter dark, their lines growing like wicks being tallowed, freezing foot and thumb for some walleye dumb enough to suck their hook and to pull it forth from the mystery below. They come in twos or threes or all alone and stand mute. Try to strike up some talk, and they barely look up, continue to diddle with their rods. Sometimes you meet them in their dark hoods as they leave the ice, and you greet them, but they won't react, sluggish as bullheads 40 feet deep, secretive as Mississippi bottom muck, unwilling to share the secret of their hot hole where they caught one skinny perch.
I am absorbed in the making of this thing called a poem, the thing I am reading over and over to myself until it comes out right, until it says what I now know I wanted to say. If I could walk back in time, I would stop into my high school guidance office and I would say, poet, that's what I would like to be.
The second half of my life will be black to the white rind of the old and fading moon. The second half of my life will be water over the cracked floor of these desert years. I will land on my feet this time, knowing at least 2 languages and who my friends are. I will dress for the occasion, and my hair shall be whatever color I please. Everyone will go on celebrating the old birthday, counting the years as usual, but I will count myself new from this inception, this imprint of my own desire.
Running through all of this, which is the kind of process of writing poetry, is the rich thread of music, the art in my family. My family always sang. My father was a church soloist, and music is the ruling passion of a number of my siblings. When I began to write poetry, I felt I had broken new ground. Now I see that I have just changed the music.
In honor of my birthday, you asked me to the sauerkraut supper at St. Adalbert's in Frogtown, my old neighborhood. There isn't a green for miles, no broccoli, no zucchini, those foreigners in the new land. Nothing sharp, nothing to vex our souls that have traveled so far from our starched childhoods, as if we had all pushed our chairs back from the table and vanished years ago, leaving our ghostly mothers with the dishes.
The complications of life, that inextricable braiding of grief and hope, inform the work of every artist. I think back to my younger self, so at home with a dreamy, visionary poetry. What's true is that the self evolves and the work along with it. Sometimes are fallow, others lavish.
I'm staying at Gale's in the missionary room, tatami mats on the concrete floor, red futon, paper lantern. She tells me the last inhabitant was a woman from Switzerland who stayed for a month waiting for a phone call from Timothy Leary. She'd met him at a lecture in Europe and was in love with him or obsessed. I don't know. I only know the phone call never came. This is the net of hope and disappointment that makes up our lives. The neighbor's passion fruit vine spills over the wooden fence, each gold fruit filled with dark, sweet seeds.
Once, but only once, I remember a poem coming into my head, she writes, out of nowhere. I was working around the house, in my bedroom actually, when something forced me, I love that, to find pen and paper. True, I made some slight changes later, but the poem was basically there before I wrote it down.
We wake on the hour of dread, pray to the one who holds us, who carries us on her hip, who could drop us over the void or lift us among the stars. We pray and feel within the worms begin to crawl, the mold begin to form, the cold, oh, the cold. We creep beyond the haystack, dig deep in the fertile loam. Down, down we sink our home, our home. We bow our heads before the plow, whisper, cover us, over and over, until all around the meadowlarks, the daisies, the clover, until all around the praises rise from the sea, from the lakes, from the rivers, from the mountains, the valleys, the plains. All around the notes rise, and suddenly the clouds disperse. The sun, oh, white milk of the sun.
I feel like a hovering bird cruising the landscape, never settling down anywhere. I suppose my detachment from a particular method, some template with which one can immediately tell the good guys from the bad guys, is echoed in my detachment from a particular place. Shouldn't we always have our bags packed and be ready to move on from whatever to whatever?
Did you expect to find me at home? Then you do not know me. I am never at home. I am always on the road. All roads lead to the telephone. Wherever you go, on or off the road, a telephone wire sings beside you. If you love me, if you truly wish to get through to me, you will hang up at the sound of the tone and dial your own number. If the line is busy or no one answers, consider yourself lucky. You can always call again. If the line is out of order, remember, you are the only repairman. If the line has been disconnected, remember, the only phone company is yourself.
As for poetry, I continue to pursue it as passionately, I believe, as ever, finding it always elusive. For my part, I have no sense that the imagination will ever die, but an expectation that words will, at some point, drop away from the process. Until that time, here I am, as much in love with the whole mystery of it as I ever have been, just humbled, finally, and thank God by a sense of the immensity of it and the privilege of being a player.
Don't tell me about the bones of Mengele. The bones are alive and well. Don't think to thrill me with tales of the drowned bones uncovered. The bones are alive and well inside the sleeves of a suit this day and carving out the figures of a fat check or severing a ribbon with the ceremonial scissors or holding the head of a child. I tell you, the bones are alive and well. Don't bother showing me pictures of the remains of Mengele. The remains are alive and well and simmering in our rivers or climbing into our houses out of the ground where they will not be confined or sliding inside the rain out of the summer air. Oh yes, the remains are even there, I tell you, are alive, are well, are everywhere.
Like most other poets, I was drawn to poetry early in life by a parent who read aloud to me. It wasn't until I was a parent that I rediscovered the joy of writing poetry. Writing is what I choose to do when I have a choice. There is no greater pleasure for me than to write a sonnet line that really works.
Marooned among these fields of corn, I think this tasseled summer sun sets far too soon. I'm just another Dorothy, born to blink between a pallid Midwest afternoon and memories archived not in black and white, but color. I have kept my Christmas days, all 44, the cedar wood I knew, its hollow stumps and all its secret ways, the field of buttercup beyond the slough, midsummer's languid movement into night. I am like the shorebirds wheeling in that space between the sky and all they have forsworn, no stranger to the salty aftertaste of visions common to the foreign-born.
That's kind of a scary thing when you're publishing a book and when you really like the person, you know, who has the poems. What if you don't like the poems? Well, we like the poems, and we really, really like Peter Denzer.
I suppose we have to have a president, if only because it is the custom and because the Congress would be confused without the fuss and furor of verbal jousting with the leader of the entire free world. What does it have to do with me? The talk is heated. This must have been a fascist coup, a stolen election. The courts are as corrupt as the rest of the system, and they are planning to put us all in concentration camps. Should I tell them? It's much worse than that. The contenders are barbaric, and we have sunk into an abyss from which we cannot escape. We will quarrel and snooze and wake and quarrel again until we notice that the sea is rising, while here and there floods drive millions from their homes, while other millions die of thirst or hunger because their gardens wither in the dry heat of a baking desert.
Metaphor provides complication, demands an intimacy with the world, and like a disturbance on the surface of quiet water catches our eyes. Some poems are fused from so many metaphors that they come before our eyes as intricate and patterned as Damascus steel. Others hold up to the reader a single perfect metaphor, the poet as proud as a child who has caught a snowflake on the tip of one finger.
No trespassing signs, all buried, we trudged in deep clothing through snow high as our hips, up the steepest hill we could imagine. The run unscrolled from the barren crest, slicked like the top of a skull under the clear weight, the blue high-pressure system of the sky, then down through the wintering weeds, where we toppled towers of goldenrod, our mouths filling with their powdery seeds, double down past rocks in a blur of branches, our eyes meeting the world at light speed, finally to flatten out like water beneath its fall. We slowed and pooled across the level sedge into the canebrake and far cattails.
About 8 years ago, writes Kathleen Heidemann, the world's largest living organism was discovered growing in the Iron Mountain area. It's a single subterranean fungus, a living maze inhabiting several square acres, revealing itself through mushrooms and spores, sent up like fingers to the surface. Kathleen Heidemann has dedicated herself for some time now to an elaborate long poem. You don't see long poems often, called The Caving Grounds, and its subject is bottomless in a way. It is all that which is below the surface.
Once upon a time, a miner undermined Cornish town until his own home slowly sank into the basement floor, down, down into the caving-in ground. On Snow Street, gardens grew unstable, and playgrounds gave way beneath their teeter-totters. Today, the rusting signs warn, "Danger, keep out." By danger, we mean caving ground, just an empty, ordinary-looking meadow now, a field of mud swallows and sumac and cement porches where, once upon a time, a miner undermined his own hometown like a nutworm, moving from the heart out, tearing down wide hematite columns for their ore, those underground supports that were a sort of spine deep down, bracing up the caving grounds.
Poetry is risk-taking, and risk-taking has results, positive and otherwise. When we use poetry to address painful concerns, death and illness, poverty and injustice, the atmosphere changes about us.
I had forgotten mulberries. their squish underfoot, their pale stain in the bird droppings on the shed roof. Life in the cities must be even worse. But will there be a harvest this year? A sin to plow under all those crops while people starved. God punishes. Those were the old times. You children may not like the berries much.
I'm drawn to persona and have used it a lot. Persona compels me because it is all about the imagination and the entrance to the other.
These are the ones who walk with us, bound lightly as the sheen of cobweb lacing the hibiscus tree, bound tightly over matter, distance, birth. In my dreams, I see them trailing in the shadow of the horses, silent in the desert night. I finger the strands which link them to my caravan and marvel at such wealth. They are my crew, my absolutes. I will carry them with me always.
For most writers, the writing life probably begins with a confused impulse to assert oneself through personal expression. But over time, if we're lucky, if we stick to it, this impulse may evolve into a kind of spiritual discipline by which we learn to steady ourselves before the work and thus before the world.
The sun sails past the equator tonight, heading for its berth on Antarctica's icy barb, dragging with it the blue stone ballast, this once in 30 years full moon. Daughter, we stand in the wake of passage, your small face shadowed by the coraled spruce, building itself up past the rooftops to untroubled sky. It's calm at these depths.
We need metaphors to make connections between our chaotic lives and other lives or worlds. We need that light to go on, that understanding to dawn in order to survive the unknowable.
My son plays Joseph in his preschool pageant. I believe he is typecast, sullen, confused beside his Mary, who flaps her arms with the angels, squeezes her floppy newborn, taken up with joy. Their play ends too soon for my son to be redeemed, to have his prophetic dream about fleeing to Egypt. He never makes a decision of his own to settle outside Bethlehem, in the town where people would later mock his son.
I don't write one kind of poetry. I'm not content to speak with one voice. There is a bit of coyote in me, and the mimic facet of coyote's nature has always appealed to me. Some of my poems are lyric, some narrative, some in tight and others in open forms.
Trace the backbone to where it disappears. There, gentians suck the color from the sky. You will see dancers, barely visible, stumbling through the aspen as if drunk. When you hear a crow's call, rise like hunger, traveling south, turn and sit. A fine pollen will settle on your hair and shoulders.
Most of my poetry arises from the same source as my perpetually lapsing Christianity.
The first time that I read a poem in public, it was in Ithaca, New York, and I was about 13 years old. It's the only poem that I've actually memorized, and Claire's, my wife over here, is going to be really amazed that I'm going to do this, but I've memorized this poem, my one poem, so I can recite it from memory, and it goes, and it's a good one for right now. It was sort of a premonition that I'd end up living in Minnesota. Cold and dreary, weak and weary, I roam the frozen north. To and fro the wind does blow as slowly I trudge forth. Day and night I try to light a warm and blazing fire. It goes out, in vain I shout, and then I start to tire. It's 80 below and the freezing snow is drifting all around me. Without a sound I fall to the ground. Death has finally found me. So,
For me, poetry has always been an action by which I both come to self-knowledge and affirm that discovery through language. Poetry has always been tied to feeling and personal perception and has been a saving gift for me in my life. It has loosened the tongue, prophecy, speaking out.
There was a sound of geese from the bay, of geese or harmonica. And the way the sun idled over the lake's cloud wall, revealing hills burning, was the way the geese advanced, dragging their phrases across the water, not in wind, but on memory. And that is why the white rabbits, startled from their daytime places, beneath bushes and under cars, are the words in a children's book.
I'm wary of the politeness of so much poetry today. It's so dry and overly meditative, or else it's obscure, or worse yet, it's sentimental, wallowing in how one ought to feel, not leaping into the clarity of what one feels.
Sometimes I really kill myself. For instance, when I find myself surprised over my own passing youth, like I just uncovered the gold face of some big deal boy pharaoh in the sand. Through dust orbiting in a particularly celestial tunnel of sunlight, I look out in the park at a boy as ancient as men get and see he's unshaken by the breaking news. He knew he was old when I was born. He knows men now petrified in busts and those who simply died unnoticed. He knows October roses well, how their dark perfumes color the rising breeze, and still he plays with the dawn-red leaves that circle him as he progresses toward a shadow, blue and certain as the distance to birth.
The World's a Book, A Butterfly's a Poem on a Page is a great introduction. All of you are aware that our butterfly is on our book here, and it's a beautiful book. The illustrator of this book is Randy Scholes.
Thank you. I would like to thank everybody that came today. I know some of you stayed all day, and that's beautiful. And thank Monica and Amelia for the wonderful introductions and bringing together people in the book and in person today. Because I know so many of the poets that I talked to outside said it was so nice to meet other poets that are in the book. You know, it was kind of a special day for them too.
Thank you for joining us here at Northern Lights. I hope that you have enjoyed many of the readings from the poets here today, and that this encourages you to pick up a copy of 33 Minnesota Poets, take it home and enjoy it.
Northern Lights, a look at Minnesota books and writers, is presented by the Minnesota Center for the Book, a program of the Minnesota Humanities Commission, with funding provided by Target Stores and the Elmer L. and Eleanor J. Anderson Foundation.